Welcome to the BBC. Your announcer tonight is Elizabeth Buckingham.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Buckingham. Tonight's documentary is about the travesty of the People's Temple, a religious cult from the 1960s and the 1970s that perished due to a mass suicide in Jonestown, Guyana.
Nobody joins a cult. Nobody joins something they think is going to hurt them. You join a religious organization, you join a political movement, and you join with people that you really like.
To their congregations, and that role represented power over the lives of your congregation.
In the name of the divine Son, in the name of the life-giving presence.
To their congregations, and that role represented power over the lives of your congregation.
I was in a lot of the meetings where people were spanked or beaten, and I was slapped once also in a public meeting.
People were brought up front and asked to, they had to tell who they'd slept with and who they had sneaked off to a restaurant with.
It wasn't a week that went by that I wasn't called up on the floor because of my behavior, because of my attitude. Stanley Clayton, up front center.
He would ask people, what do you think we ought to do with them? You think I ought to get a good boxing? And then you'd get a resounding roar, yes.
You might fight 5 people in one night. Well, you know, you're very tired. I've seen situations where they actually knocked the person out and actually took water and threw the water back on, woke him up and woke him from.
In one planning commission meeting, Jim was getting notes, kind of love notes from one of the members on the planning commission.
Jones is sitting there calmly, and so another lady said, well, I don't know why you keep doing that. What makes you think you got something that he wants anyway? And so another woman says, well, you know what, you ought to just take off your clothes and show him what you got. You ain't got nothing. And so by this time, they look back to Jones, and so he looks up his glasses, and he nods with approval. Yeah, that's a good idea.
She was to be totally naked, and she was down to nothing but her skin. Not even any shoes on, you know. No bra, no panties, no nothing.
Then they begin to say what her breasts look like, her stomach, butt, vagina, you name it. Everything they could think of, they were saying. By this time, her face is red. Her body's almost red from embarrassment. And I noticed something. Jones was sitting, looking over his sunglasses, but he had a smile on his face, like he's really enjoying this woman being torn down.
I have a conscious memory of sitting there thinking to myself, this is wrong. And I didn't do a damn thing to stand up and say, this is wrong.
It's like a child in a dysfunctional family. On a certain level, it's normal, you know? I just kind of took everything in stride.
But then we felt like we had gotten involved and gotten in so deep that it was actually no way out.
Jim Jones was not a man with any kind of a political background, but all he had was like a huge following. If this man had become a senator, holy hell. Politicians have large followings. If he had managed to become a senator or something, he would have had 3 or 4 times the amount of followers he did now. And when you get that many people together, you have a really good advantage to use. You can use mob mentality against them. If you can get that many people excited, you know, you can get them to do just about anything you say, and Jim Jones knew how to get people excited.
Jim Jones, people would argue that Jim Jones wouldn't have become political power, like gained political power because he was a communist and because he had socialistic living. That's not true. In the 70s, Nixon pulled us from Vietnam. Actually, Jim Jones went to Guyana in 1974, the same year where we were wrapping up Vietnam. Nixon also opened doors with China, made connections with them. Communism became less of a threat, just the USSR was our main enemy. Another reason why people say Jim Jones wouldn't gain political power is because of his crazy ideology. He believed everyone was gay. He didn't really, no one really slept. He thought he was the only heterosexual, yet he had multiple gay relationships. But we don't realize how often this happens in our culture. Just a couple years ago, a New Life pastor was completely having homosexual relationships. In the 1500s, they believed that the bread and wine magically turned the body and blood of Christ.
As Dr. Wolfenstein mentioned, a lot of them had sleep deprivation. When you're that tired, you don't think, and you especially don't think for yourself. One thing that he did was he indulged this belief that sleep was evil and it was selfish and that was taken away from the people's temple. And the more tired the people got, the more they just handed control over to him. He just fought for them. He got all the sleep he wanted, and more. And because he was the leader and he had to stay in charge and focused. But as for them, they didn't need to think for themselves. That was something that he was willing to take charge of. And he was so persuasive because he fought for them. They literally became mindless automatons. If Jim Jones had been able to become a senator and he had been able to get this giant following of even more than 1,000 people, I really think he could have caused some turmoil in the United States. He would have used this mob mentality totally to his advantage, to a point where either the President of the United States would have to terminate him or start to follow him too. It got to a point where you really couldn't think for yourself. And when you get that many people in a mob already not thinking for themselves, you can do just about anything with them. Start turmoil, create wars, terminate people, whatever you want. He really could have had a super